My name is Devon Silk, and taking a turn from the health-oriented presentations of Alan and Riley, going to recommend some good beers. This is what beer should I order next? A beer recommender for the adventurous beer drinker. A bit of information about myself. After spending years working in the bar and restaurant industry, I decided that transitioning into data science was the way to go and wanted to use Galvanize to do that. Do enjoy playing tabletop role-playing games with friends, and while playing, we definitely do try out new and different beers every week. This may have happened to quite a few of you, myself included, multiple times. You're wanting to have a beer. The old reliable just isn't cutting it anymore. You just don't know what exactly you want to have. So you may ask the bartender or your friends, hey, what do you think? They'll reply back, well, what do you like? You answer them. And then after thinking for a little bit, they might come back with, have I got a beer for you? Their data might come from their own empirical knowledge or things they've tried or heard is good. For me, my data came from user review, beers, and brewery data sets, all gathered from Kaggle. And then wanted to use the wisdom of the crowd to provide recommendations. And then how to determine what that best crowd is going to be. An example of wisdom of the crowd is from Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, polling the audience or asking the audience a certain question when they weren't sure. I polled my own audience of 5 friends in asking which beer is lowest in calories, and that was their results there, with 3 of the 5 believing Guinness to be the lowest. But finding the nearest best beer out of the data set was a little tricky because there were quite a few reviews. Over 7 million reviews for over 160,000 users. Some of the data that was given was sparse, such as quite a few zeros in the look, taste, smell, and overall category. But one metric that was there all the time was the score, and that was just how the beer was rated. Also looking at the same beers, for beer number per review, the number of reviews per beer, excuse me, quite a few beers have a lot of reviews, other beers not so much. So it was tricky to get rid of the beers that only had 1 or 2 reviews. 60% approximately of all the users had only left a review for 5 or fewer beers. That leads us then to finding which model to use and which metric to use to determine which beer which is going to be the best. After trying 3 different metrics, Pearson baseline mean squared distance and the cosine similarity, we're using the evaluation of the root mean squared, and the lowest was going to be the Pearson baseline. So that's what I used to base the rest of my model on. This is a small subset of scaled down version of my entire data set. And as you can see, there's quite a few blank spaces. And the goal was to then fill in those blank spaces to make those recommendations. Focusing right here on this first one for Eddie, we want to know what Eddie might rate Union Jack and get those recommendations. We're going to look at Union Jack. We're going to compute the similarity between Union Jack with all the other beers that Eddie has rated. And as I said, this is a small subset, so lots of people have rated lots of beers, but lots of people have also not rated lots of beers. Computing the similarities, we come up, as you see here, as a 1 with Union Jack because it did compute against itself as well. But then you also see that the 0.998 for Sierra Nevada Pale, because one of the reasons he had rated it a 5, maybe lots of other people had rated 5. So with that higher value, it was then weighted a bit, producing a recommendation that Eddie would probably rank Union Jack as a 4.71. That is then applied across the entirety of the data set, filling in all these empty spaces for different users of what they would rate all the different beers based upon all the neighbors around them, giving us the top 5 beers recommended for Eddie, being this one from Arizona, Focal Banger from Vermont, Et Tu Brut from Pennsylvania, which is unfortunately is retired, as well as then 2 other beers from Massachusetts. One of my next steps would be to refine the data sets. One, because I would need to remove the beers that are no longer produced, as like that Et Tu Brut from Pennsylvania. However, it would not be to remove them on the scoring side, because that would help with recommendations for other beers. It's to remove them from the recommendation part. Also wanted to set a good threshold, find out what would be a good number for how many recommendations is too many or too few. Additional input as to if that beer or those beers recommended are available. Can you even get them? Can you get them from the local liquor store down the street, or I'm trying to think of the main brewery or the main liquor stores there in Wheat Ridge and the eastern part of Denver that aren't they're not there anymore. Then eventually to create an app so that a user would be able to put a recommendation of beers that they like, plus then get back beers that they should try, and that versus how they would rate. I can make my own recommendations if you have a question about any of those. Otherwise, if you have any questions at this time, one, though the crowd was right, Guinness does have the fewest calories of those 4 beers.